With us today on a second episode of Unacknowledged and Unknown is a man many people maybe are aware of regarding the Sasquatch or Bigfoot topic, and some that are probably unaware of. So without further delay, I want to introduce my my second mystery guest, Troy Hudson. Hello, Troy. How are you doing today?
How are you doing, sir? Thank you.
So welcome to my channel. And for any of the listeners who don't know, Troy is the founder of the NOBRO, which is the Native Oklahoma Bigfoot Research Organization. I hope I got that right.
Yes, sir.
And he's going to be doing some, we're just going to have a discussion today, questions and whatever I can think of. Could you give us a short background of the history of how you eventually got tied into the Bigfoot topic, and sort of what led you to that, as far as your background with rescue services and all that stuff?
So in 2004, I was working for the U.S. government. I was working in law enforcement, and one of the other coworkers knew I was from Oklahoma. That was our office was in Dallas. And he said, "Hey, you're from Oklahoma. You ever seen a Bigfoot?" And not sure exactly where he was going with it. And I asked him, "Well, what do you mean?" So there was the organization BFRO, Bigfoot Researchers Organization. They were doing an expedition in Southeast Oklahoma. So he was trying to explain to me where it was at, but I went over in his office and looked on the computer and realized that was Honebe, Oklahoma, which I was born and raised about 2 hours north of there. But I had family that lived in the area in Tallahena and the Smithville area, and I knew of it. Used to go through there. There's a Boy Scout camp not too far away where I had some experiences, and that made me stop and think for a second. So long story short, I contacted BFRO and talked to Matt. He asked me what I did and welcomed me on the expedition. While there in Honebe in December of 2004, it was apparent that I knew a little bit more about the topic than what I thought. A lot of stuff I experienced and listening to everybody talk, those are some experiences I had as a child growing up in different parts of Southeast Oklahoma, up near Lake Eufaula, up in the Okmulgee County area. And after that expedition, there was nobody in the BFRO in the Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas area. And eventually I was recruited to be an investigator because of my law enforcement background. And then it's been pretty much 100 miles an hour since then. I had left BFRO in 2009. I had left 2009, 2010 timeframe, and was asked to speak at a few social events. And a lot of people kept asking, "Well, what's the name of your group?" I said, "Well, it's not really, we don't have a name of the group because it's just some of the people that also left BFRO same time I did. And we were just, hanging out, going to different places that we knew, different places that I know. Because I had taken a lot of reports in the Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas area. And after probably about 2012, that question kept asking, "What's the name of your group? What's the name of your group?" Well, we decided we might as well come up with a name for us, even though we don't call ourselves a group. It's just a bunch of friends, going places, hanging out. And so a lot of us are native, come from native bloodlines. So we said, well, let's just call it the Native Oklahoma Bigfoot Research Organization, because just about everybody in the group, except one gentleman at the time, was born and raised in Oklahoma. So that's how it came up with the name. We spent a lot of time, operating in and around tribal properties, conversing with, tribal citizens, eventually meeting some elders that pointed us in some good directions and meeting other elders. So up until today, I got started in with the Honabi Bigfoot Festival and Conference in 2008, doing four-wheeler expeditions during the event. In 2010, we actually took over. We were asked to take over the conference, organizing the conference at Honabi, and 2010, 2011. And then there was a little bit of a spurt time there. And back in 2014, came back around, and we've been organizing and leading that part of the Honabi Festival and Conference up until today. It's just a short 2 weeks away for the festival and the conference at the end of September. We do operate some expeditions. We have investigators all over the state of Oklahoma. They just currently wrapped up an investigation this weekend at some tribal property in south central Oklahoma. Our investigators are in different quadrants of the state, and they handle public speaking events, educational events, investigations that relate more to a long-term event where people have something happen on their property and they report it. They may not know what's going on, or they do know what's going on, but they need some answers, and they're reaching out for some for some guidance and some help. So that's majority of what our organization does: public education, outreach, and investigation, working with landowners. We do spend quite a few time on some tribal properties, working in and around the different tribes, because some of our members have connections and are embedded in that type of a community where those work out, where we're able to, lead investigations or work with some of the citizens. I speak different events across the state. Actually, I've gone up to Wisconsin and speak up at the Mohican tribe a couple years ago. So
interesting. I do research in Wisconsin with a friend of mine. So he's just relocated, but the other one is Native American, who had his tribal community was in Tomahawk, which is sort of north central. So I'm familiar with that area that you're talking about, or at least
Right.
Wisconsin is inundated with Bigfoot activities.
There was a lot after my presentation. Of course, obviously, people from the audience get up, and between speakers, I had numerous amounts, some very interesting, a lot of that area south of where the tribal community is, and the casino was where where I was speaking. It's a lot of farmland. It's a lot of dairy farmland, rolling hills, but they have a lot of other cryptids that some of them, were discussing, which I've heard before. Of course, the Wisconsin, Minnesota area is just, and a lot of people don't think about Oklahoma or even Illinois. There's a lot of reports of Illinois. Matter of fact, we've had a couple people I've known for many years that actually live in Oklahoma, but they're from Illinois, and really, and you may get to this question, but they're everywhere.
Yes.
Upstate New York, Pennsylvania.
To me, the easier question is where aren't they?
Correct.
And that to me is like a lot. That's more of a quicker answer.
Correct.
Central America, South America. These both continents have these reportings that are, are historical. So, what do you say?
The only place I know there's no reports of the Bigfoot are places like Guam and Hawaii.
Hawaii is another one, yeah.
But they have their own folklore. They have their own, in Hawaii, they call what we would call in native culture in the lower 48, little people, Kanaloi, the little people in the Cherokee and the Choctaw Nation and some of the other tribes. But in Hawaii, they have the Menahui. The
Minute.
Minahuis
Yeah.
is the same version as the small people. So, you know, India, I mean, Vietnam,
Yeah, you've
different
got the
parts of
rock apes in
Africa.
India. They have
Uh,
their religious term for and in Chinese culture, it's embedded in Buddhism. They call it the Monkey King.
and in Japan, it's called the Higabon in
Bigfoot.
Japan.
Yeah.
So it just, you know, I, you know, part of my part of our job in our organization, as well as doing our conference, you know, it's not our intent to make people believers, but if you were to step back and looked at, if there's hundreds and hundreds of tribes across the world, and they have a name for them, and they are sightings from Russia to Africa to Southeast Asia. So again, you made a good point. We can tell you where they're not, where they're not found,
Yeah,
where there's not reports. I guess you could say not reports, but the more industry, more people are moving into rural areas, more people are moving out of the metropolitan development in the rural areas for, timber and rural business. So sightings have picked up, just in my observation through the years. Even in Oklahoma, so there's parts of Oklahoma that there's a few places that, not saying something doesn't go on. It's just I don't have reports, but we're getting reports in areas where we haven't had reports before. That really doesn't mean very much. It's just that you have two situations. So you have sightings, excuse me, you have sightings, but people wish not to make a report.
Yeah.
So that area may not have reports or known activity. That doesn't mean that there's not something going there. It's just like in some areas of southeast Oklahoma, different parts of northeast and northwest and south central Oklahoma, there's quite a few communities, even some tribal, just, the community's basically, 90% tribal based. They don't talk about it, but there's a ton of stuff that goes on in those locations. I mean, there's stuff that goes on weekly, monthly, throughout the year. But then you have the areas where there are situations where people do make reports, and that's where there's a little false sense of information that, over in this part of the county, they must be everywhere because there's tons of reports. Well, I could look at the north side of the county, or the north end of the county, and say, well, there's just as many reports going on up there. It's just people up there don't report it. They don't openly talk about it. They don't call or, get on the internet and say they saw something. So, reports, no reports.
Word of mouth. I mean, like gossip, you find it's word of mouth in those areas where they don't officially report it to your organization or others, and they just sort of may share it among their neighbors or among their family, and then not really sort of suppress it, other than if you were to know them, they might tell you. But I mean, that could be, like you were saying, in the areas where you've never had sightings out of before. As development gets into those areas and starts to developing through lumber, gas, fracking, mineral removal, those encounters, I would think potentially must occur. But then, of course, you're dealing with the people in the development industry reporting that, or the few people that live there. And so that's where I think there's a sort of, like you said, those encounters aren't reported, doesn't mean they're not occurring.
Correct. And a lot of it too is, some of the situation is the locals don't want people in there looking. A lot of them will actually say, and a lot of them tell me, because I know I don't, I'm not going around. Really, tell you the truth, our organization, we have one guy that takes care of our website, and he posts reports, but I don't, other than my normal job, I'm just so busy that I don't spend a lot of time on the internet researching other than what people tell me. But there's a lot of situations where people will say, hey, this is going on, but we really don't want people over here looking. And I'm like, okay, it's ain't a big, I respect what they are, and I'm kind of in the same boat. And parts of areas of Honebi where I hang out. There's some areas that, I don't want no bunch of people running around in there and call blasting and, put trail cameras everywhere. It's just,
Yeah, we have a similar, probably the same issue going on here in Illinois. We have property owners, farmers who, on a personal basis, I have friends that know these people, but they don't want anybody on their property, and they're not concerned with going public, and they just don't want people under the excuse of being hunters to ask permission to hunt on their property for deer or whatever, knowing full well that's really an excuse to go in there and, like you said, call blast, gather trace evidence, and do things that really they don't want them wandering around doing. So people in certain areas of where I do research in Illinois, they keep it close to their vest and they don't share it, and I don't blame them. And people that have given me permission, I'm very careful. I usually it's express permission that, yeah, we'll let you and maybe another member, 1 or 2 members come on here, but don't share it with anybody. Don't tell anybody. And if I do decide to put that information out there, no locations are given other than the account, the encounter, with no names, no people. So I get those questions a lot. Could you give me just the county, the region, the district it's in? And I just say, I'll put it this way. I'll give you the name of the state. How's that? It's like, I can't really, out of respect for people, you got to understand the situation they're in too.
Yep.
So I have another question for you. You mentioned when you do excursions or you take people out on like forerunners and side-by-sides, when you started taking over organizing the Hanobi conference. In your past excursions into the field, what has that revealed to you that maybe you didn't know before you started doing these excursions in the past? What whether it's trace evidence or whatever you have you discovered that has revealed to you something that was important about their behaviors, something that you worked hard for? And like I said, you don't have to give me specifics. You can generalize, because I don't want to, I don't want to put out there information that people may take and try to apply it, and they're not the people that are out there.
No, I understand, but what I'm going to talk about, I really have no problem saying it, because we share it, and people ask all the time, when we do our storytelling at the conference or when I speak at other events, people ask, and I don't mind sharing. And to answer your question, so the things I started noticing is say, for instance, and I'm just throwing out general numbers. One expedition, we have 7 people. One expedition, we had 10 people. One expedition, we have 14 people. The numbers don't matter. They do not matter whatsoever. Because when I was in BFRO, we were running 20, 25, 28 people expeditions. It did not matter. It has nothing to do with the numbers, but it has something to do with the people. So I started noticing that when we would have certain people out, or a certain group of people, things would happen with this group. Nothing would happen with this group. Nothing would happen with this person, but something would happen with this person. So one day I was in front of a tribal elder. Spoke to him many times before and always said, hey, come on back. And I happened to be in an area and I was visiting with him, and I asked a question. I said, so when I'm out and I have people, sometimes it's a private exercise, or I just have somebody that's with me and they go, hey, let's go out. So yeah, we'll go out in the woods. Why do certain people have that visual encounter? Oh, he's right there. He's right there on the side of the ridge, right, standing right there by that tree. Wow. And then I take somebody else out and we don't even get a bird to chirp. We don't even get a squirrel to bark at us. The elder looked at me and he said, you need to look at the people. He said, because the big people, the Bigfoot, they know what's in your heart. They know what kind of person you are. they know who they want to be seen by, and they know who they feel comfortable with of getting close to or revealing their location. So if they're hitting a tree with a stick, clapping their hands, making a noise, chunking a rock, whistling at you, showing their eyes, they just gave away their position.
Yes.
So in a military type, tactic, if I want to remain quiet over there in those woods, I ain't going to make a sound. You're not going to know I'm there. But if I want you to know I'm there, I might flip my flashlight on. I might throw a rock at you. I might tap a tree. I may whistle at you or go, hey. So if they are doing that, they're giving their position away to us. So that tells me that they are comfortable letting us know that they are right there.
They
Especially
don't feel threatened.
they show their eyes.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, it makes sense. They don't feel threatened. And I know from people to people, I would feel that way towards a group of people or certain individuals that I don't want to interact with. I would stay away from them and not, as you said, reveal my position.
You just cross the street, walk down the other side of the sidewalk.
Right. And apparently, if you feel threatened, that's how you would react. You would you would ignore the threat or stay away from the threat. And I notice that myself. Certain individuals I have taken out in the field, nothing. And sometimes no insects even. Everything's quiet. And then I'll go back there with a different individual or two or three different individual, and they're coming into camp, crawling close to us, getting in our face. In some instances, me having to stand up, and a friend of mine standing up in the middle of the night it was pretty well moonlit. You could see well with your eyes and just see that I could see him. In fact, in one instance, we stood up and me and my friend Dave go, "We see you." And they were like 30 feet away, crawling into our camp. And it just stopped. It was like it was going to come check us out. We were awake. We were just sitting there. We stood up and go, "Hey, I see you." My Dave goes, "Yeah, who goes there?" As in the military would say. And and it stopped and then it just backed up. And this has happened several times. I take other individuals out, even during the daytime. No wood knocks, no nothing. Just total. And I know they're there because I was there the day or two before and had activity by myself. And so I always concluded that they could sort of gauge a person's intention, their heart, as you say. And I guess if you're not in harmony with yourself, you're not in harmony with the world. So then it's pretty obvious to somebody, a regular human being can sense that in other people. So why not Bigfoot?
The part of the reason why I say I don't have problems saying some of those things is I've been doing this enough, and we've had people, and we have even people that show up, and somebody will go up to the Honeby Creek store and say, "Well, Troy's up there you go up there to the church mission," or they'll call me or get me on Facebook or something and say, "Hey, where do we need to go?" I don't mind telling you, now most property in the area of Honeby is very private. It's all private land. There's no public land. But even in different parts of the state where I've been, and Boggy Depot State Park, I don't mind saying that. Different places they're not my secret honey hoes, but I know, because what you and I are talking about, that they're either going to come see what you're doing or they're not. And a lot of times I know, I might not know the person that's reaching out to me and say, "Hey, where do we need to go?" Well, I always tell them, the best thing to do, don't go looking. Don't go act like you're looking. Just go camping, set up a campfire, and do your normal camping experience. I said, don't try to hide anything. Don't try to be sneakative. Just go and enjoy yourself, because you're going to waste your time walking around in the woods. You're not going to see anything. So your best chance to sit around that campfire, having normal conversations. If you're going to play some music, play it at a low, so you can hear things around you. If they want to come see you, they're going to. If they're not, they're not. Now, that doesn't mean you might hear stuff way off in the distance, but as far as them coming into your camp or coming in near where you're at, the one thing I do tell people, and it's not a big secret. It's just, you got to be observant. You have to be paying attention to everything.
Yeah.
I'm here stoking the fire, but my ear is over here in the woods. When I turn my head and when I raise up to turn back around, my eyes are scanning as I'm I mean, that's how people miss things. And I've sat and watched, even just, back in the military days or just playing around in the woods, you could stand there in a white shirt and a white robe 50 feet from somebody. And if they're busy doing what they're doing, they're probably never, ever know you're standing there because they're not paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed that situational awareness it's everything. And it, even if I notice when I'm in the woods where it's, in the daytime with another individual and we're talking, we sort of developed a situation where I'm looking over their shoulders behind them and they're looking over my shoulders behind me. And it always seems to work to our advantage because, they're always trying to get strategic observational positions on you where they hope that you don't see them, but it's not as difficult as people think it is. And I've run into situations like you're mentioning where I probably had some of my most major interactions and even sightings at nighttime where we're just in one location. We're in one location and camping, even without a campfire, and we're just at our campsite. And they, out of curiosity or for whatever reason, come in on us. And that's our account. That's our evidence right there. I find looking for them, other than to look for footprints, trace evidence, and what they call tree structures. Yeah, that's easy to find if you know where their activity is and where their corridors of travel are. But as far as I get older, I find it's a lot easier for me to set up camp and just let them come in on us. And for a while there, during the fall and spring months, we don't even have a fire. We just go out in the woods, set up camp, and just wait. And we have our conversations just like you and I are talking. And in one instance, we had one, I believe it was a female, at least it sounded like a female, make fun of us. As we were talking, we talked for a couple hours, and it gave an utterance, a vocalization that was like it was making fun of us.
Right.
You're talking. It was like it was bored hearing us.
Right.
And it was and though sometimes you just it's like they say, keep the recorder on all the time. Well, you're limited to batteries. So you don't always have it on. But
right.
What is your current understanding of what Bigfoot is? I mean, you can when you answer that, you might want to include, your participation or gathering of DNA evidence for the Sasquatch Genome Project in what you think they are, or at least what you feel that the Genome Project has revealed in that regard. So that's my question.
So what I'm going to say basically answers your question, but so in 2005, when I started doing the investigation of BFRO, there was a Texas location not far from where I was living at the time. And I was like, no way, it's right next to a major, it's literally the northeast side of DFW. I mean, I was like, nope, this has got to be. So call and talk to the family, realized they were less than 30 miles from me. They were about 24, 25 miles west. Well, I'll come over that weekend. Listening to the kids talk and listen to the activities going on, they're whistling in the woods, they're making, cooing sounds, kind of like a dove makes, and they've seen them, the kid, the younger boy, the younger daughter, and even the teenage boy, all saw them. And that first night while I was there, we were standing outside. It's near a major city. So the lights in town are illuminating the property quite well. You have no problems walking around the property. And obviously, unless you go into the woods. So we were standing there, and one was standing at the edge of a small outbuilding off to the near the tree line. And I turned and the kids were actually looking at me and I happened to be looking in that direction. Of course, you know, my head scanning and I hadn't looked over and I asked the boy, I said, well, who's that? And he turned, and right when we all, I guess it realized that we were looking in his direction, you know, it turned and shot across the side of the building, which was all white. And I realized that wasn't a normal person because the height at which the leg, you know, the groin area was, and
Right.
the length of legs, and seeing where the eave of the house was. And at the same time, the boy goes, oh, that's one of them right there. So I was like, okay. So for about 4.5 years, I spent just about every other weekend, and in some cases every weekend, on a Friday or Saturday night or both nights on that property. And the amount of information that, you know, an observation of the things I took in. What's bringing up to that story is one of the other investigators in BFRO was working the Kentucky investigation, the Erickson project.
Yes.
And I was on the phone with him describing the things that was going on this property. He goes, hey, that sounds just like what's going on at the Kentucky site. So long story short, he would fly back and forth. He'd go to, he would live in Colorado. He would fly to Kentucky, gather the videos, you know, that was being taken. He would fly to Dallas, work with me. And then actually Adrian started funding my project. We were putting cameras up. That's when I learned cameras don't work. So going down the road of technology, long story short, this gentleman said, hey, there's a young lady in East Texas that's doing DNA, and I'm going to send her your information because she's looking for somebody in the Texas area to help her out with doing field investigations. So long story short, to get to your answer, so Dr. Ketchum, Melba Ketchum, we were on the phone, first time talking, you know, obviously getting to know each other. You know, asked a lot about my background. I said, you know, at that time I was about 15 years in law enforcement. Some of it is at a city level, and then most of it was at the federal level. And she was asking me, you know, questions about some of the investigations I've done. And she just flat out asked me, she goes, well, what do you think they are? I said, well, the more I get into this and more I'm remembering some of the things I heard as a kid and just my own thoughts. I said they have to be a people. They're not an animal. They're not an ape. I mean, I've seen their children. They live in you know, some of them live in a family group. Their kids, you know, in 4 years, we kept seeing the two boys go from about my size in 4 years, go to just, I mean, their growth rate is incredible. And their agility is it's, you know, it's phenomenal. You can't even comprehend the ability at which they can go from laying in a push-up prone position to spinning and turning and walking and running across an open area. In there's no way Carl Lewis could be able to recreate that, because
it's almost like gymnastics. Only it's for them, it's just a regular movement, I guess, or regular.
So
movement.
She asked, you know, some more questions, and I said, I think there are people. They have a language. I've heard their language. We've recorded their language, but they have a sense about them that they would be your neighbors, but yet for whatever reason you can't have any type of interaction with them. You're not supposed to talk to them. You're not supposed to, you know, they stay over there and we stay over here, but yet we see each other from across the fence, and you know. So, and I said, you know, I've been starting it into the native side of things with it because I've been told you need to go talk to this person, go talk to this person. And she says, well, she goes, how old do you think they are? I said, well, they're old. I said, they've been around for probably thousands and thousands of years. I said, they, you know, at that same time, I was doing another investigation in East Texas that a picture was drawn by one of the young girls that saw a white one that had a Fu Manchu, almost walked with, you know, like was arthritic, like it had arthritis, like it was moving very slow. And it had a discolored patch, gray patch on its shoulder. actually over on this side of the shoulder. And between that time, I was out in western Oklahoma, out over by Lawton, Oklahoma, doing an investigation. And that folder was there. And the older lady that was there at the house looked over and saw it. She goes, "Hey, you've got a drawing of him right here." And I'm like, pardon me? She goes, "Yeah, that's it right here. Fu Manchu." And yeah, he walks like he, I said, "No, wait a minute." So from this place in Texas to that place over in southwestern Oklahoma is 200 miles apart. And I said, "Well, when was the last time you saw this?" And they said, "Well," and then the older son was about my age. He says, "Well, just last week." So when I got home, I looked at my notes, made a phone call to East Texas, and he was there. So one or two things. It's an identical twin.
Right.
Or they can travel that fast. Now, here's a key. The spot in Lawton, over by Lawton, the grandmother was the grandmother basically sped. He is this particular Bigfoot he's a tribal leader of this area. And she threw her hand in this area. But the grandmother basically was explaining that she said, she moved her hand in this fashion of, well, he's the tribal leader of this area. And I said, well, tribal, what, in the southwestern part of Oklahoma, in the Mount Scott, Lawton, Comanche County area? She goes, no. This whole region. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, she said, most of all of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and northern Texas, he's responsible for that. And I was like, huh. Now remember, this is way back years ago, so didn't know quite how to take that. Now, if you told me, I'm just gonna make note of it. It's back then I was still a little bit of not where I'm at now.
Mm-hmm.
I was still trying to comprehend what she was explaining in that.
That's a lot to process. But comparatively, if you compare it to Native Indigenous people and tribal leaders of certain nations, we would accept that out of hand because they're a people and we would understand that. So this inability to accept that they're a people, which I've always felt that and made connections with people in the tribal community to sort of search for answers. And everything I've been told, even by my friend who's his connections are from Oklahoma and Wisconsin, Ojibwe Cherokee. And he said, he says they're viewed as a people. He says they may have characteristics that we would call primitive in some ways, but to say that they make these comments, which I'd never have accepted, while they migrate, all this, I would almost say the term nomadic comes to mind is probably more effective, that they're more nomadic in their travels, like indigenous people all over the world. When you look at even in Siberia, the descendants of the Mongols, they had to be nomadic to follow the movement of not just their own herds, but of the animals they lived off of. So to me, that sort of helped me understand it a little better. For you to say about these two individuals that looked alike, you said were either twins or the same individual being in two different places in a matter of, you said, days?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a long distance. And my only confirmation I have regarding something like that is a print a friend of mine found in 1920. And then 2 years later, I want to say 67 miles away on a creek bed, I find the same print with the same characteristics, only it was a little wider at the heel, but as far as the characteristics of the toe and the front of the foot and how it looked like the same individual, only here it is a little less than 2 years later, and the back of the heel had filled out, was wider, and the print seemed a little longer. And when I showed it to him, he goes, "Why are you showing me my print?" I go, "No, that's a picture of mine from just recent." So at that point, you have to sort of, you speculate in your head what's going on here. And I had only had one conclusion I came to. There were some children in the family that were almost identical, or it was the same individual, but it was 2 years later. And as you said, the growth spurts are incredible.
Yep.
So I was at a loss to explain it when I came across that. I was like, what's going on here?
There's, when I give presentations or when I'm doing storytelling, people come to storytelling because they want to hear stories. You have people that come to storytelling because they have an encounter and they don't know quite how to take it, perceive it, accept it. So they want to sit and listen to other people. And then a lot of people come there, they're just armchair quarterback type. They get on the internet, they watch a few shows, they don't spend much time in the woods, but everybody has questions. And I try to explain to people, I said, well, I have the same questions. I have the same questions y'all do, but what I've learned in my time, I have forgot of even trying to realize why their eyes can do what they do. They just do. Why are they here? Now they're over there. Now they're standing there. They do things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired of trying to figure it out. They just do stuff. They may do something that's comical. They may do things every now and then that you're like, oh, wow, wait a minute, let me write that one down. I didn't know that one. There's
yeah.
And it happens sometimes, but for me, and then there's a lot of people who say, well, if you have all, and that's the other thing, a lot of people go, you have all this experience, all these sightings, where's your evidence? Where's your video? And I'm like, well, when I got started at that location in Texas, I had a Sony camcorder that same was used at the Kentucky project that they, furnished me at the Texas project. When I was carrying that thing, nothing would happen. And the moments or the times that it was in my truck or it was over there sitting on the trampoline or something, stuff would happen. And one day I was up in Oklahoma visiting, and an elder just said, well, just put the camera away. This is this is September of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
I've done literally probably close to over 60 expeditions probably in my time, countless field investigations, and everybody that's with me, and I'm rarely alone. There's always somebody with me. They'll tell you that what I go into the woods with is the clothes on my back. And from the time I put that camera down till now, that's where I explain, that's why you ain't going to have no video. And that's why you're not going to see my pictures, because I really don't care. Would you have the chance? And I pose that question. Let's say you were given the opportunity, the most sophisticated military grade technology out there. Would you like to try for 15, 20 years trying to get that money shot?
Yeah.
Or would you like to spend those 10 to 15 years with your own eyes seeing Bigfoot kind of on a regular basis, night and daytime? Which one would you choose? Because
the latter.
Right. And what I trying to get the point across to them, it's your experience. It's your story. That's stuff for you to tell someone later, to tell your grandchildren or tell your children or whatever the case may be. People come and say, well, we want to try doing it the way y'all are doing it. Well, the way y'all are doing it, the way I do it, and the way one of my other investigators, one of the other guys in our group does it, is totally different than the way I do it. So we're all individuals, but those are experiences for me. Those are the experiences for them. And like I try to explain to them, that's your experience. I am not going to spend my gas money and countless hours fighting ticks and chiggers to try to get somebody a good money shot video so they could be satisfied. That's their experience. They need to go out in the woods.
Yeah, and I think there have been exceptions, or whether you want to call them mistakes, exceptions, whatever on, you know, I always look at Bigfoot. Yeah, there are people, and people, I'm a people. There is no perfect human being. There is no people. Maybe Bigfoot is more prone to make less mistakes than we do because of their environment, but I still think they do make mistakes. I've been able to maybe capitalize on those mistakes and go into areas where this happened 2017. And I'll make this quick because this is basically I'm interviewing you, not myself. But I hadn't come in on my camp when I lived in New Mexico and got surrounded again. This was before, they had the Sony handy cams back in they had their equivalent back in 1979. And I was surrounded by, initially I thought, boy, that one individual can move fast. He's at my 12 o'clock, then he's at my 6 o'clock, then he's over here at my 3 and my 10. And then I come to the understanding months later, well, there was probably 2 or 3 individuals around me. And all I had is a small campfire, and I was in the Black Range Mountains in New Mexico, camping by myself, 11 miles from where I had parked my car. And that sort of brought me back to, that was in 1979, and it brought me back to Illinois in 78. The year earlier, I had an encounter where I had something I was mushroom hunting for morels during the spring, and something just ran through the trees and the brush and stopped short of me like 20 feet away. And I could see its outline behind this huge oak tree. The branches were so big that the branches of the trees were almost touching the ground. And this thing pushed through the branches and stopped just short. And my dog did an about face, came back to me, and I sort of looked over and I see the silhouette, and I'm going, boy, that's a big bear. We don't have bears in Illinois, not in this part of Illinois. So at that, I ended up having my encounter in New Mexico the following year, and I thought, made me think about what was going on, and made me realize that years later, when I was like out there filming structure and footprints and trace evidence, I always noticed that, boy, they're never around. But boy, when that camera was put away in my backpack, or I left it in the car, then all of a sudden I started having these audio and things thrown at me and all sorts of experiences that would never happen when I had the camera. It was like they figured the camera, whether they knew what the camera was or they were fearful of the camera, whatever the reason was, it just the camera didn't produce any evidence.
Right.
Except for one time, and that was I was using thermal. And my friend, 2017, he goes, he's Native American, and he goes, I'm going to take you to see Bigfoot. Well, I had to clarify that. I said, oh, you mean to see their evidence, to see evidence of them being there? He goes, no, we're going to go see Bigfoot. And then he goes, I can't guarantee you'll see anything, but we're going to go see him. So we did an overtime, nighttime investigation. Just went into the woods of his area where he's had him surround him. He's seen him. He has a portfolio of sketches, pencil sketches that he has given me of all these different members, that there's so many different facial features. I've come to the conclusion we're not dealing just with one family. There's more than one family there. So when he brought me into this area and he said, we're going to do a nighttime, and it was a cold camp. We just went in, didn't build a fire. We dressed warm. And I said, great. I says, I have a thermal. I have a thermal made by FLIR. And he said, yeah, bring it along. And I'm scanning with my thermal. We're sitting there. It's nighttime. And we had heard activity before nightfall, just before dusk. We heard what sounded like them. And he was sort of, I could tell by the way he was acting. He said, well, it gets better. So I guess he came to the conclusion it was them. And I'm looking at my 12 o'clock, sitting with our backs against a down tree in this forest. And we're sort of near these structures, these arch structures. I said, let's post up here near this structure that looks like they made, this huge tree arch, and it had branches leaned up against it. And he goes, okay. So we were about 30, 40 feet from this structure, and I was at my 12 o'clock looking past it. at couldn't have been 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And I see this with my FLIR. I see this thing lean out from a tree and look directly at me from, we figured later the next morning, it was about 90 to 100 feet from us, directly in my line of sight. I'm looking at it through FLIR, and I had it on, it was on orange, was a palette.
Mhm.
And it stood out like a sore thumb. So I handed it to my friend, and I go, look, and he looks and he goes, yep, there. But when he's looking at it, he immediately turned away, stepped away from the tree and walked away from it and walked away. And he goes, oh my God. He says, it's got a big one. I go, what? He says, I can't say the word he used on this. He says, but it's got a big butt. You know, I walked away and I go, holy cow. And then of course, that turned into, within that hour, I'm flaring in about 35 feet from me to the left of that structure. There was this hill, and that was probably 65 feet from us. Well, halfway, midway between that hill and our position where we were sitting, on FLIR, I see this thing crawling on all fours. I could see its backside, its hips, its shoulders, no head, no tail. I go, Dave, I don't think this is a cougar. We don't have bears. So I handed it to him, and he followed it, and it crawled in 18 to 2 feet of brush. The weeds were 18 inches tall at best, and you could see the top of it, and it's crawling really smooth, and you could barely hear the brush moving. And then it crawled toward that hill, and where the hill hit another hill, there was a draw there, and in that draw was a bunch of fall down structures and deadfall, and it just went behind it, crawled behind it. And Dave's watching, and he goes, it just crawled behind all that deadfall. And he says, and now it's behind it, and it just popped its head up over the top, and it's looking at us.
Mhm.
So that was a treat to me. I was like, wow. Like I said, the FLIR, whether it saw it or didn't see it, it didn't seem to care. Of course, FLIR thermal doesn't show any UV, doesn't show it, doesn't have an emitter on it like
Right.
night vision. So it's I have better luck with FLIR. Now night vision, I've been actually able to see their eye shine or eye glow just with my naked eye. The night vision enhances that a little, makes it a
Right.
little clearer, but I have
Right.
more luck, just like you said, without anything.
Right. Right.
So that's
Yep.
why I wanted to talk to you, because I know in the past I've seen some of your videos from years ago where you're just standing in the forest with another gentleman, and you're just you're having activity all around you, and it was you were just standing there. Was no fire, you didn't have flashlights, you weren't lit up like a Christmas tree, you're just there without equipment. And it was a video I saw of years ago, and I thought, that's funny, we sort of do something similar. We just go in the forest, sit down, and let it happen. It's so much, and I'm approaching 70, so I'm past my bushwhacking days.
Yeah, but you're still young.
Yeah, well, but now with the encroachment of development into wilderness areas like the Kiamichi Mountains and stuff, by like fossil fuel companies, their development for building homes and all that. Do you think the species, that Bigfoot, they need protections in place? Because I know encounters are increasing because of our encroachment to develop develop wilderness and areas so we can, I mean, let's face it, our population's increasing. People need more jobs, we need more businesses, we need more fossil fuels. It all sort of seems to be tied to a bigger population growth.
Right.
Do you feel that there's going to have to be an I guess you'd say an interference by the government, if you want to call it that, intervention by the government to sort of create protection for these people?
No, they have survived thousands of years. They are very good at obviously hide and go seek. They're obviously has been shootings in the past. I've investigated a couple, and plus we know the infamous Honda siege from back in 2000. But as far as a letter of the law for the protection, I mean, I know people are trying. I don't think it's necessary. I mean, they do well enough on their own. I think, even though I've been involved in, obviously still involved with the DNA project, we look back on it now and we're kind of glad certain things didn't occur the way we were intending them, because, you look for recognition, again, you're not going to have every single person in the world. You're going to have all the people that live in the cities that's never stepped foot in the woods. They're going to be the naysayer. I mean, you're not going to convince, no way to convince everybody because of religious belief, certain types of scientific background. It ain't going to happen. I being a former federal employee working in federal law enforcement, I was not involved in any type of secret covert stuff that related to, UFO, Bigfoot, paranormal, and things like that. But my military background and being in law enforcement, being around those types of people that work in those profession areas, that will never, my opinion, that will never happen in our lifetime. That's not going to happen. We know the UFO stuff is coming out. It's being released quite a bit. The UFO situation is a little bit different. Bigfoot can hide behind a tree. Bigfoot can hide in the woods, but you can't hide something in the sky when half the world looks up at the sky. So there's nothing. I mean, you can't hide that.
Yeah, and also the behaviors are different. We don't know their need to hide their threat from us. If it is an advanced civilization, what do they fear from us? We're probably so underdeveloped in comparison. And a Bigfoot, I do agree with you from the standpoint that Bigfoot has the abilities to be elusive and preserve their species themselves, their family units, and to figure out, when they're pushed back out of an area, they just go to another area.
Right.
When an area gets developed or there's reforestation done, they just go to another area. Even in Illinois, we have microforests everywhere, state parks, national parks, southern Illinois, but we have large plots of rural areas where, as opportunists, it doesn't take, in fact, some of my own experiences have been along cornfields and tree lines where they meet. That seems to be a very popular area for them. And they're sort of out of mind's eye and out of sight when you get back into 1,000-acre plots of cornfields, and they're all surrounded, or the perimeters are all forested areas. So I was wondering, if I wanted to survive, it's, between the growth of these huge monocrops, not just corn and beans, we have just huge plots to grow food for Del Monte and these huge agribusinesses. So they're all over this part of the state. So I've always wondered if that, being an opportunist, that's part of a survival mechanism. And so it's not very hard for me to believe that right on the DFW area, as you mentioned, they live in this edges of this huge metropolis, unimpeded. And we're finding that out here in Chicago. There's areas, waterways and greenbelts going through Chicago that even people living in the city never go to. Never visit, because they'd rather go on vacation in Colorado or go to Oklahoma or, Northern California. But I saw the remoteness of Eufaula. I was in Eufaula Lake a few years back. It was just a vacation, and I sort of coupled it up with doing some field investigations, and I went to Lake Eufaula, and I was like, yeah, this is perfect habitat, and then went to Southern California to an area near La Quinta, which was on a reservation park, which was a Native American community.
Mhm.
And it was, again, another area, though the environment and ecology was different, it could support easily uh, wild people, if you want
Right.
to call them that. So I have your sightings, I think I touched on this about the sightings and experiences increasing communities, sort of your native communities because of development. So have you noticed this yourself? The sort of uptick as opposed to years ago when you were called in every month or other month compared to now, you probably get called in more frequently, right?
Yes, there's a lot more rural areas where family will live, or a single mother with children that live in a very rural setting. Maybe the next house is maybe a quarter mile away, or maybe it's across the road, but it sets back off the road a ways. Um, we're finding out what people refer to as habituation type sites. Um, we just call them long-term investigations, because the family will say, well, we've been having stuff going on here for months, I think even last year, but we just didn't really know what it was. We just thought maybe a mountain lion would come through the area every now and then, because the dogs and the chickens and the horses all get bent out of shape, until one day the kid or the one of the adults in the family see something and they go, well, then that, so where years ago we would maybe have one, maybe two of those a year type of investigations, where we're running into now, where we're running probably 3 or 4 a year, and we've had a few here recently. But sometimes and they either just want to talk on the phone, they get reassurance. Here's what we won't know until we come out to do an assessment. We just call it an assessment. Assess the property, assess what's going on. You do interview the family members, take a look around. Some of them do, but then some of them just like, they don't want nobody out there. And they're just, if something happens, we'll call you type thing. But those are notable instances where there is a little bit of an uptick in that. But you also research the location. How long's the house been there? Well, it's been here. My father lived in the house. Well, it's not new property. A lot of those, what we have seen, there's only very few that they are a new property, bought the property, cut the trees down, threw up a trailer. Those are very rare. Most of them are on properties where the houses have been there for years, many, many years. It's hard to tell, is it just something they just have not been paying attention to and they just recently paying attention to it, or has something changed? So, I mean, those investigations do take a long time, because we have my Texas site, we had another location not too far north of there, almost identical. It was about a 15-mile difference. And it took 2 years to realize, by keeping data, keeping notes, keeping a notebook, it took 2 years to realize that this house had activity on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then the other house did not. But the other house had activity on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, where the other house did not. And then you can follow the creek in the Greenbelt from point A to point B and realize, okay, so they're up there on Monday and Tuesday, and they're hanging out down here on Wednesday and Thursday. Wow. But it took 2 years, to accumulate that data and accumulate that information, that it was only by accident. Because I would get, this family would go, hey, and then a couple days later, this family would go, oh, by the way, this is going on. Then you start looking at it and going, oh, wait a minute, hold on. Then you have both families keeping detailed notes. I tell everybody, keep a journal of everything. If it's a weird bird you hadn't seen, because everything has a reason. And then it took basically 2 years to realize that this family group that was visiting this one property for so long, apparently now is visiting somebody else back to the Northeast. and it's really not all that far if you look at how they are able to travel. So, but again, those investigations take a while to start.
So that sounds like what you refer to as a long-term habituation
Right.
that could possibly even be several generations at one house or the
Yeah,
other,
correct.
which lends to the question, did the previous owners, previous family members who lived there, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, were they just, as people are, and I could totally understand it, are dismissive or just decide not to talk about it? Because I know among certain people, and it isn't just Native Americans, people just don't want to talk about it. They don't want to bring it up.
Only one property. The current homeowner had said that the lady had lived in the house before them. They were actually friends of family, but they had bought the house and they had stayed in touch, and they were asking her when she had came over. I don't know she came over for something, and she just happened to be asking, and she told them, she goes, "Oh yeah, just leave them alone. They're going to be a pest to you in the beginning because you're not going to be used to it." Yeah. He said, but if she goes, "If you notice that all my curtains and all my windows are real high up on the window, they cover everything because they will tend to stand there and stare inside the window. Have no problem of you looking up at them and seeing them standing there."
Yeah.
So, she says, "You'll get used to them." So there was one incident where that particular home in a very, very rural area was having stuff going on, but when they had reached out to the homeowner that lived in the home many years, I think more than 20 years, if I recall right, that, "Oh yeah, she just leave them alone. They're not going to bother you. I mean, they're going to be a pest every now and then, but they're not going to bother you." It's because, for her, it was just like no big deal. Because she just got accustomed to realize, well, they're not going to, every now and then they will rattle the doorknobs. Are they trying to come in? No. But I mean, even myself and some of us that has stayed in some cabins in different parts of Southeast Oklahoma, and just my own encounters myself, I've heard them rattle the doorknob, but after I heard him step off the porch, I did creep in there and made sure that door was locked. It was not locked. However,
really?
It was
I think they know how doors work. They probably observed us they've observed people.
So real quick, I'll tell you how they know. There's no difference between them and us. They probably look in the window and see what a computer is, but they have no knowledge and no interest to even know how a computer will work. But at that Texas site, for a while, the kids were getting in trouble and was explaining that the Bigfoots are turning the water on outside to get a drink. We're getting in trouble for it. Well, that went on and on. Finally, the mother was in the bathroom and the outside faucet was on the wall where the bathroom is. She heard it come on. She heard it squeak on, heard the water running. She was in there doing her stuff and she realized that water's running a long time. So she walks in the living room, and then the kids are in the living room. She goes, "Y'all need to want to go out there and turn that water back off." And the father, which is sitting over by his computer, turning, goes, "Well, they never went outside. The water's not on. They didn't go out and turn the water on." And she goes, "Well, I just heard the water come on." So they all run around outside. Sure enough, like normal, that the hose is strung all the way over towards the fence, towards the trees. But the interesting part is when they go to have to turn the water back off, they actually have to really wrench to turn the water, loosen it up to shut it off.
Oh, they reefed on the valve.
The Bigfoots will turn it all the way and actually almost wrench it down.
Wrench it down. Yeah, of course I can imagine.
They know how things work. They're watching.
Yeah. They watch all of this. Oh, I gotta go ahead.
Yeah, I gotta make some phone calls.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. We can cut this short. I know you probably they might need you out there, or possibly you might have to do some organizing.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to let you go with this real quick question. Maybe you can give me a short answer to it. People that have witnessed or been aware of or told bad experiences by other eyewitnesses, or even people like myself that have been told these things, where people have had bad experiences. where they've been injured, hurt, in some cases killed, and these stories floating around, fear mongering that, I mean, if Bigfoot are people, could there be some bad ones? I talked to Melba briefly about this. She says, oh, definitely. You have the whole range of personalities. Could this be attributed to some of the 411 missing encounters regarding the David Paulides books? Because I always wondered about, is that a possibility? But then, of course, I look at our own people, our own race of Homo sapiens, modern humans, and what we're capable of. Some of us are indifferent, easygoing, and some of us become opportunists, criminals, and do things that are we murder and kill people and do things that and I always wondered Bigfoot that have been shot and injured and potentially even killed by people who have no clue what they're shooting at. I see this during deer season where people have shot each other because they're carrying their deer out that's cut up and packed out and made the mistake of shooting other people. So I always wondered what the response is. Do Bigfoot see this and figure at one point that person or maybe all people are threats? What's your answer to that?
Well, so you're familiar with the Honebi siege?
Yes.
So when I was, starting and doing a lot of the expeditions, doing a lot of stuff in Honebi area, the Honebi Valley, a lot of the locals were really giving me a hard time, telling me, you know what happened here, you know what went on here, and I'm up on the other side of the mountain where that occurred, way back up in there. I've been back up in there by myself, a lot back in the days. I would safe to assume it's obviously the same family group, because I had an elder that lived there that knew intimately about what happened during that incident, and actually told me, yeah, you're going back up in there where that group lives. Well, I'm still sitting here today. So, and they have done some crazy things. You know what I mean by crazy? By running between on the church property, running between the cabins and standing out, and they're trying to walk. I mean,
you weren't there though. You weren't
No.
over there with a gun shooting at them, possibly injuring them. And I think they have the ability to recognize who those people are doing it. If not you or I, I mean, I'm sure in those situations, they probably have a hair trigger toward those people who have done these acts of aggression. See, that's the other flip side of the coin that nobody wants to talk about. Bigfoot are aggressive. They did this, they did that. And you have certain channels that fearmonger that aspect of it, but they don't talk about what happened days or weeks or months before and who were those individuals. And that always leads me to question, where are we hearing? It's just like when you hear your kids come up to you and your son is saying, she did this to me first, and your daughter saying, no, he did it first. And then you have the neighbor who saw it unfold and say, no, one person did it to the other, and then the story. But see, that's the side of the story you'll never hear in a lot of these channels.
Well, let's make that part 2.
Okay, I'll let you go. I'm sorry.
I mean, seriously, because I got a lot of stuff to talk about on that side.
Well, great. I appreciate you coming on the channel, Troy, and you get to what you have to do, and good luck with your what's going on in your situation there. But thank you.
No problem. I'll get with you a little bit later.
Thanks, Troy. Nice having you.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.